Hello there, and welcome back to the Progressive Property YouTube channel. And in this episode, we're going to be speaking to a couple who were forced to work for free and have gone through multiple redundancies and how they changed their lives by building a successful property portfolio. So let's dive in to this progressive success story. It's fabulous to see you all here, back in the Progressive Property YouTube channel. I'm Sean Fitzpatrick, and today we have got two fabulous guests. We have got Erica and we have James. It's great to have you both here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So, you weren't always an Erica and James. At some point you were an Erica and a James. And at some point you weren't in property. So, I want us to go back to yesteryear. And Erica, can you tell us, where do you live at the moment?
So we live in Nottingham.
Did you always live in Nottingham?
No, the Nottingham thing is pretty recent. So I grew up in Ireland, I'm Irish Egyptian, and I was a TV and news producer. I moved to London, worked in London for a bit, and then I moved to the UAE, and that's where I met James.
So you actually met in the UAE. So you had grown up in Ireland, then went to London. What was the kind of link there? How did that happen? Like, was it that, did you just have to go to London to study what you wanted to study? And
No, I studied in Ireland, and I got my first job in TV in Ireland. But then I wanted to segue into news. So I moved to the UK. I got a job at the Telegraph on their video team. And it was really at a time when like video was the future, it was cutting edge and not like we know it now where every piece of content has to come with video. But we were really sort of, at the exciting part, the start of all of that. And there was just a lot more opportunity in the UK, in London, to do what I wanted to do.
So not much opportunity in Ireland?
No, I wouldn't say that, but like I qualified, just as the recession hit. It was tough times there, 2009, 2010, when jobs were scarce and, there was a lot of really experienced people there. My dad lived in London, so it sort of always felt like it was, sort of a natural progression to go there.
And so you moved to London. You're now working in that, and then you moved to the UAE, or did you do it?
Yeah, so I did a bit of over and back. So I worked in Ireland for a bit, and then I came back to the UK again. I worked for the Evening Standard, and then I got a job opportunity to move to the UAE for a news organisation in Abu Dhabi. I've always wanted to live in the Middle East because being half Egyptian, that really called to me. So yeah, it was a great opportunity and I grabbed at it, and 3 weeks later I was on a plane to the
Wow, big risks. And so you're a risk taker. You're somebody who wants to...
I think I love a carefree life, and and the idea of just jumping on a plane and going somewhere and seeing what happens really excites me. I was going to a job, to a warmer climate, to, better pay,
Sounds cool.
It didn't feel that risky.
Well, that's great. And of course you both met in the UAE. So James, did you grow up in the UAE, or what was the...
No, I left the UK in 2012, 2011, something like that. And basically I'd graduated university. I wanted to get into journalism and didn't have the money for a master's and very much wanted to go to the Middle East. And so I thought, well, rather than trying to get a job on a newspaper in the UK and then work my way up and then someday they'll send me abroad to be a foreign correspondent, I could just go and do that. So I moved to Beirut in 2011, 2012, I think it was. And I had a 6 months return ticket in 6 months. I said, right, I'll give myself 6 months to see if I can become a journalist. And ended up staying there 5 years and
wow,
reported from Lebanon, Iraq, Turkey, Jordan, Cyprus, all over the Middle East.
So did you feel like there was instability with your previous role?
Yeah, definitely.
And Erica's nodding. She knows a little bit.
Yeah, I worked for a paper that basically was semi-bankrupt for a while. So we went about a year without pay. And in the end, they gave us all our back pay. But
you went for a year without pay?
Right?
Yeah. You used to have to go to the accounts head, Jamal, and be like, I've got $400 for my rent and I need $400 to live. Is there any way I can get some money this month? And he would go through the accounts and see what little bit he could give you.
That's insane. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. It was a really exciting time to be working in Lebanon. It was kind of the build up to their first elections in 9 years. And so I kind of made that choice to say, actually, I'm in a really good place, doing some really good work, working with a really great team. So I decided to stay with the paper. And there's a bit of a sunk cost. Once they owe you 6 months pay, you sort of stick around so that they'll give you the rest of it when the money comes in, which they did. So
Excellent.
That was great. But yeah, it was certainly instability. And to be honest, slightly jumping ahead maybe, but one of the reasons that I've got into property is that idea of having an independent source of income that no one else can take away from you, that, I can go and do something that I really enjoy, like reporting and working in the Middle East, but that I've always got that backing of property income.
Yeah, I totally get it. We're living in a world right now where the idea of a stable job is disappearing.
I've been made redundant twice in my career.
You've been made redundant twice?
37,
And this is the thing. People work their whole lives in a job, building somebody else's dream, and it could be just taken away.
I mean, I think nobody who's worked in journalism has missed that that's a reality. Like every newsroom that you've ever worked in, there's always conversations about cuts and doing more with less. And, that was definitely in the back of my mind that, you get to sort of 45, 50, you're expensive on the grand scheme of it. And there's 21-year-olds coming out who can do 10 times more than you because they're, digital natives or whatever. And those guys get fired from newspapers. I didn't want that to be me, suddenly having to reinvent myself at 50.
Mm-hmm. Which so many people have to do. And so many people are finding themselves in that horrible situation without the backup, without an alternative income stream. So I totally understand that perspective, given what's going on in the world at the moment. And so you're now in property, you've been doing stuff in property. So let's fast forward to today. What successes have you had in property?
So
what do we start with? There's so much we could talk about.
I think when we were in the UAE, we started buying property, and we were sort of doing it the traditional way. We would save up our income. James bought his first house, and then with the help of his mother and sister, they transformed it into a mini HMO. I was really jealous of the income that was earning him on the side.
So you saw the income and you're like,
I was like, wait a second, this guy's got a parachute and I don't have one. And my mum's in property as well. So, she'd always kind of, told us that, no one can take a house away from you if you own it, and can always turn it into an income if you need to. So she really believed in this sort of bricks and mortar approach to investing. So we started buying. James bought the HMO, and then he bought another house, which he turned into an SA.
Yeah. And to be honest, years before I ever came to Progressive, I was kind of benefiting from Progressive in that. So my mum's been in property for years, and she was always banging on to us, when you get some money coming in, you want to get a house, buy something, because, it's worked well for me for 40 years. And she'd been brought along to Progressive probably nearly 10 years ago now.
To Masopi.
That's the multiple streams of property income event.
And she sat through it and she said, I've always just done traditional single family lets. But she was like, maybe this HMO thing, maybe that's something. So she went home, she repainted some walls to do nice features, she, kitted it out and turned one of her single lets into an HMO. And it quadrupled her income overnight.
What? So that's really interesting. So even before you found Progressive, your mum had found Progressive. And even though she was already a successful property investor, she took what she learned and quadrupled her cash flow.
And she did that from, the Masopi event.
The free entry to Progressive,
So multiple streams of property income is Progressive Property's flagship event. It's 3 days of intensive training that covers all the major strategies that are happening in the UK right now. And a lot of people have the opportunity, if they're in the right place at the right time, if you're watching the YouTube, if you're listening to the podcasts, if you're doing research, to get to that event completely for free. If you want to become successful in property and change your life, comment property below and we'll send you a link to attend our multiple streams of property income event. Now, back to the video. And that's what she did.
She did that, exactly. And so then she was saying to me, look, we found a house. I think you should buy it. I went sale agreed on it, even though I didn't have the deposit, and worked out how the hell I was going to get the deposit from that. And then literally every day my salary came in, every month. I transferred the entire amount to the builder to keep him working, and lived on my credit card and did the refurb that they oversaw for me. They managed the builders, my mum and sister, which I couldn't have done from Abu Dhabi, So that was hugely helpful.
So you were still in Abu Dhabi at this point,
I was still in Abu Dhabi, working away, sending money back, doing that here. Anyway, kind of fast forward a couple of years, she'd come back to Masopi and sat it again to be like, a couple of years ago, it was pretty useful. Let's see what new stuff they're talking about. And came away and was like, I'm going to try serviced accommodation. And she had a bit of a kind of annex at the back of her house that she lives in. So she was like, look, I'll transform it into a serviced accommodation and see what the buzz is about. Like, see if it works in Nottingham. And then it did. And she said, well, maybe I'll try this on one of my other single lets, see if I can transform that into an essay. And that worked.
And was this, again, just off the back of the multiple streams event?
Back off the multiple streams. So then she said, for your second house, when you remortgage the first and get some equity back, do in a serviced accommodation. And let's see if it works.
Now, for anybody out there, by the way, SA, serviced accommodation, is basically just think Airbnb. So acquiring a property using either creative means or buying it and like putting it on Airbnb, booking.com, online travel agents and getting some bookings, right? Yeah. And that was really working for her.
Exactly. So it worked for her and then indirectly it worked for me. And I think from that, she then went and did Kevin Peneskas's serviced accommodation course.
Here Progressive. She went on to further training.
Yeah. So she went on to further training, having seen that it works and then saying, right, well, I have that track record now. I want to see what more you get by doing
and
that.
How can you make that into like a business?
Yeah. Do you know, I find this amazing because there are some people out there who don't think you need a property education. And here we're seeing successful property investors learning more than they realize than you and going and implementing it and making more money. And then, of course...
And then passing it on.
I was going to say, because, of course, you two then find Progressive. And it's a... Do you know what? Yeah. It's a family link.
So what happened then is I was... also in the UAE at the time, looking at, him getting these amazing refurbs done and being like, I want in on this. Someone take my money and like JV with me. Although I didn't have the language for it at the time. I didn't know like that I needed a joint venture partner. I was just trying to find someone who would refurb a house for me,
Hang on. So you were trying to give your money to people?
I was desperately been like...
But this is so interesting because I meet so many people and they say, well, nobody wants to lend their money. Who would want to give money to somebody else? But here you are in the UAE and you want to lend your funds.
Yeah, I didn't have the same emotional connection to, like, say, Nottingham, that James did. So it didn't matter to me necessarily where it was. I just wanted good value and good returns. And I wasn't there to oversee the refurbs and I didn't have the experience to, know exactly what I wanted. So I needed somebody, to partner with. And in the end, I ended up finding a guy and we bought new build flats because, his sort of argument was that, with a new build, it's very hands off, you won't have to really do any work for 10 years. And actually I found the opposite to be true. All of the settling in on an apartment block happens in the first 2 years and anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Yes. I've had leaks in all three. But that was that was the knowledge I had at the time. That was what I had to work with. And it's fine. They're good flats. They're, I'm happy with them. But
would you do the same thing now, knowing what you know?
No, because for a start, a single let flat, 1 or 2 bedroom flat, it maybe earns me a couple £100 after the mortgage. And so when you then look at HMOs, which is a strategy we're chasing now, there's a lot better returns to be had. And okay, there's a bit more work involved in the front end, but now that we're back, we can do that. And now that we've been educated, when I got made redundant in the UAE, that was my second time being made redundant. We were like, James immediately was like, I'm going to quit my job too.
Did the responsible thing.
Yeah. You did the responsible thing and quit your job. You're just over broke. You're J-O-B.
Exactly. So we moved back to Ireland, the UK, and we bought a camper van and we thought we're going to spend 6 months. We're going to go to the Rugby World Cup, which was in France. It was coming up. We had some tickets. We were going to really enjoy like 6 months and then we were going to figure out what we were going to do with the rest of our lives, And we had a lovely time.
Yeah, it was great. And we traveled we spent, a month in Scotland, a month in Ireland, 2 months in France, traveled all over.
We spent time with our families, we really reconnected with people.
And what did you do about funding at this point?
Oh, well, I got a redundancy payout.
So it was the redundancy payout. So you're using your redundancy payout from...
We had decent savings. I mean, the thing is that, in our previous jobs, we were paid pretty well. So we had, a decent amount of savings saved up. And then in the way that it works in the UAE, when you leave a job after a period of time, you get like an end of service to help you with the kind of move back to your home country or whatever.
That sounds like a very good idea.
They don't do pensions.
There's no pensions.
I see.
So it's the equivalent of that.
Yeah.
It's their equivalent. Also, living in a camper van's quite cheap. We were cooking a lot of our own food. We were traveling around. We had a solar panel.
In the mountains.
Hiking, swimming in the sea, swimming in the lochs in Scotland. All that sort of fun stuff that we love to do. We did that up until November, and then we were sitting in a campsite and a storm blew in, and it was such a bad storm, and all the trees were falling around us, and all the other camper vans and like campers had like left.
We were the only people on a deserted campsite,
flooded
in the pouring rain.
Wow.
And we were like, what are we doing here? So we're like, okay, we've got 2 choices. we either drive as far south as we can get, maybe south of Portugal, south of Italy, somewhere like that, and we hole up for the winter and we try and find some, sunshine. Or there's a Masopi coming up in November in Peterborough. We could...
One of these multiple streams events, okay?
Could make our way back, see what all this property stuff that James's mum had been talking about, was it something we'd be interested in doing?
Do you know what? This is sounding to me like this decision was probably a very, very important decision. You just didn't even realize it. Well, let's hear what you decided.
We had spent months writing lists of what could we do? Could we start a business? What kind of business? How much money would that make? All these different options. And we just sort of kept coming back to property. So we drove back to Peterborough, and it was pouring rain and it was miserable. And as someone who'd become quite accustomed to being in the sunshine, didn't love that. It was so grey. So miserable.
But what Peterborough lacks, it makes up for because it has progressive.
Well, we've actually found some really nice camping spots around Peterborough. The countryside around Peterborough is actually lovely.
Yes, absolutely.
And we come in the van and we stay over.
I know, and I've seen your van. Yeah, it's really cool.
So we turned up at Peterborough and we did two things. We did the HMO Discovery Day, which was sort of a sample with
Alex Sekotowski did that.
Yeah, and we actually made some really good friends from that we still hang out with today.
We met a guy on that we then went skiing with 6 months later and is now a really good friend.
Oh,
just
wow.
From the one day Discovery Day.
Fantastic.
We just find like-minded people, when you sort of show up to these things. So then we did the 3 days, multiple streams of property income. And from that, we...
signed up to Kevin McDonald's 3-day.
You joined the No Money Down family.
We joined the No Money Down family, yeah.
And we joined the mentorship, so we spent 12 months then being mentored by all the fabulous mentors on Kevin's program. So from there then we started to build our small empire.
Yeah. So tell me about your small empire.
Okay, so we started off with rent to rent because, having walked out on the job already, we turned up at Masopi and they kept saying, don't jump out of your job before you've built your parachute. And we were like, well, it's
too
a little late for that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So you need to make this work.
We need to make it work.
Yeah.
So we started off with rent to rents.
So for people out there who don't know what rent to rent is, just what's rent to rent?
So we work with landlords who either don't want to deal with tenants, don't want to just kind of put a family in, have had issues in the past, etc. And we take it over as a corporate let. We manage all of the kind of upkeep, maintenance, management, and we run it as Airbnbs. We turned up in Nottingham, we went and had a meeting with the estate agent that manages my HMO and said, this is what we're doing. And he said, well, I might actually have something for you, and took us to see one. And we said, yeah, we'll take it. And that was our first one. So it happened quite quickly. Then from there, we kind of were sort of slogged away at marketing and getting out there and trying to meet people and all of this. And I think it was about 6 months later.
Running through all the steps that you get off this program, just
all of Kevin's.
Doing all the checklist of jobs and hoping that something sticks.
Yeah. And it's really hard when you don't know what bit works.
Yeah, because it's testing and tweaking and it's, split testing and all of this kind of stuff.
We did leaflets. We did, we went to talk to estate agents.
And so you got to 6 months.
Yeah.
And how did you feel?
It was tough.
Yeah.
I think it was tough. And especially because, we'd come in and Kevin slightly blows your mind with all these million ways to buy property that you sort of think going into it, you go along with your deposit and you make an offer on a house, and if it's accepted, then you can buy it and you get a mortgage for the rest of it, and then hopefully you can refurb it and make it worth more. And then he sort of says, well, why the hell would you do that when you could do it creatively? You can do lease options, you can do exchange delay completions. There's
vendor finance, assisted sales, rent to rents.
Yeah,
all No Money Down stuff.
You don't need to own the house to control the asset.
Yeah, you don't need to own it to control it, but you can control it without owning it and make money from it. So you don't actually need to own the property at all to make a lot of money from it. Yeah. And the richest people in the world have known this for a long time.
Yeah.
So the rich list, they own nothing but control everything. Yeah. If you think about Airbnb, we're talking about Airbnb, the biggest accommodation provider in the world, and they own none of the properties.
Yeah.
So it's a really smart way of thinking.
I definitely was struggling with this because I was kind of saying, we've been given these tools, but when you sit down to do the numbers and you say, right, I'm going to offer a lease option on this property, and you start doing the numbers and you're like, this is really complicated. And you're trying to tweak all these numbers and make your spreadsheets work and things. And you sort of bang your head against the wall a little bit saying I don't feel confident. What if I've made a mistake in my number here, And we went back and spoke to Kevin about this, and he was like, just follow the steps and stop trying to make it more complicated. Just have a conversation with someone. Are they open to the idea? What numbers work for them?
Just be normal.
Be normal, yeah.
Being normal, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's actually something that Alex Sepetowski said in the HMO Discovery Day. He was like, really think about where you're being weird in the conversation and what kind of awkwardness you're bringing to it, and then just be normal. Have a conversation with someone.
Just become unweird, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that massively helped us.
And I think it helped us because as ex-journalists, being curious is a natural state of being. So, when we were being weird, we'd just be like, okay, well, let's just ask questions and have a conversation and don't have an agenda,
But this is the thing, so people set out to start businesses. And they go through the slog. They set out alone to start a business. They go through the slog alone. And they get to a point where they realize it's very challenging. But they've got nobody there to tell them to tweak it, to stop these little weird things, how to make this thing happen, to keep pushing you forward. Because if you had been doing this by yourself, would you have stopped?
I mean, we think that the community that we've built sort of around, or that Progressive has built around us, has been instrumental. You can't separate the two things, the successes that we've had from the community that's there. Because at every point when we've run into a problem, and it's not just the mentors who are amazing, but it's the people who are just further along on their journey than you that you can go to for help. And sometimes it's easier to ask for help from someone who's just a little bit further along from you than it is to ask for help from someone who's like,
at 100 properties
empire,
and
And I would say the best thing about being in this community is that you post questions saying, look, I'm struggling to make these numbers work. I can't get this spreadsheet. And 3 people will comment underneath saying, do you want to jump on a call? I'm happy to talk you through it. Have you got some time now? And people will just offer their time totally free just to say, oh, well, are you sure those numbers? What if you tweak this? What if you offered that? Maybe that works. And it's amazing.
It's that network, it's the support, and it's the kind of pushing forwards. So what happened after the 6 months?
So we stuck with it. We did all the small, consistent actions every day. We worked on our business. We worked. And we got another rent to rent. And then that same landlord that we got that one with offered us another one. And then somebody in the community was like, I have a house around the corner and the tenant after 4 or 5 years is moving out. Would you be interested in taking that on as a rent to rent? And so suddenly we had 4 rent to rents in a year.
But see, isn't that amazing? So in less than a year you got 4 rent to rents. The first 6 months you were following the process. What you were actually doing. It wasn't wasted time. You were building a foundation. You were building the network. You were building the credibility.
We had no idea, for example, that, one of the people in the community had a house around the corner from us. We were just being friendly, being ourselves. And obviously we were building up trust with them. And so when that property became available, they thought of us.
Because it's a people business.
Yeah, because we didn't know
we weren't in it to get something out of them. We were just having conversations with other people in the community. And
there are going to be people out there who are thinking, but why would somebody give you their property? Surely they want to make all the money themselves. Why would they work with somebody else? Why would someone do that?
Well, they're making guaranteed rent. So with one of our landlords, he's really interested in building a portfolio of properties. And he's not interested in managing them. He has no interest. He wants to do the buying. He buys at auction. He does a refurb and then he hands them over.
And he does a lot of, he's moving quickly. Yeah. So he is always concentrating on the next auction, the next refurb. He's doing all the build teams. He doesn't now want to be worrying about
tenants and rent and all of that. So that's where you come in and you can take these properties on, manage them, get them filled with guests and make money.
And sometimes the properties are just too far away from the landlords. They want to keep an eye on it. They want to make sure their house is safe and secure and, there's not leaks happening that they can't find because they're not local. So we've just started construction on a 3-bed terrace house that we're turning into a 6-bed HMO. And through that, we've had loads of conversations with people who are accidental landlords and they've had a house and it's been locked up for 23 years since they split up with their partner or, there's so many reasons why.
And this is what it's all about because a lot of people, certainly when I first came to Progressive, I was very one-dimensional in my thinking. I thought everybody thought like me. And my thinking was, why would anybody work with me or why would anybody give me money or why would anybody give me a property? But it's actually about the situation. If you understand their situation, their problem, and you solve their problem, then you can make money. And you can do it while helping people. There are some people out there who think somehow people in property are greedy or somehow dishonest or immoral. I mean, what would you say to those people?
I mean, we used to work in the media, and like something that we hear a lot is stories about how, big bad property investors, and, most of the people that we know, and certainly our impression of property investors before we got into property was
you see a lot of people on social media. There's some really great people out there doing some really interesting stuff, but there's also a lot of kind of blowhards that were talking about how they just made £1 million off a deal that's cost them nothing, and aren't I so fantastic? And you're like, yeah, great for you, but like not really what I'm getting into it for. I have a really strong belief that a government came in and banned the private rental sector, it would stop the economy, right? People wouldn't be able to move to a new place for work. They wouldn't be able to I'm going to take a punt and move to a new city because they'd have to buy their own house. I've lived in a dozen rental properties in the UK. I've never lived in my own home. I own property, but I've never lived in my own home. And I never wanted to, right? Like, I have made that choice to live in private rental accommodation, and it has a vital place in society. But I also think landlords have a responsibility. You're providing a house to someone, and it should be a house that you'd be happy to live in. It has to be warm and watertight and, everything functioning. And I think that's really important. I haven't met anybody actually through Progressive, through the community, who's trying to get 13 people in a bedroom and no electrical certs. Everyone is out here.
Yeah, because we teach people how to invest in property ethically, creating win-win situations for people. Like no one has to lose here. The landlord is winning. He is buying the property. He doesn't want the management. He's giving it to you to manage and to look after on a rent-to-rent basis, and you're making money from it and profit, and so you should.
Yeah.
Because you're solving his problem, and you're solving the problem of your guests as well, because they need somewhere to stay, right?
I mean, you've either got visitors coming to the city who are then going out and spending money in local businesses, visiting family, sort of tourism, or you've got contractors who are here to put in new power stations, build new houses. They're traveling for work to also be investing in the communities. So it's not that it's taking it out of supply or making it harder for people. I think there is a role for this.
Huge. I think there's a huge role for it. And you're speaking very passionately about this. And so I can see it's something that you really believe in. And I mean, do you think Progressive has played a big part in that aspect?
I think we've always believed in that. I think if you've ever lived in rented accommodation, which we both have, and some fairly shoddy rental accommodation.
I lived in a basement room that had a window at pavement height, and every time it rained, all the water just rolled off the pavement and straight into my bedroom. We've all been there.
Sounds glorious.
Yeah.
Obviously, we want to provide accommodation that is better than that.
Yeah.
Because you know what it's like to be a tenant, so you know how to treat them.
Yeah, but I would also say that I very much came into this thinking that you had to work in a job to save up the income to buy a house, and then your income plus the profit from that house could build you your next deposit, and you kind of had to keep doing that. And maybe over 30 years, you'd have a portfolio you could retire on. And then you come to Progressive and you're like, actually, there's 50 ways to buy property, and not all of them involve deposits, and not all of them involve hundreds of thousands of pounds. And actually, that can be a job,
Yeah, and not all of them involve spending any of your own money. Big penny drop moment when I came to Progressive, that one.
Yeah, and I think it's a funny one because we've learned a lot through Progressive, but, I think one of the things that we feel is that like it's really important to recognize that like no money down doesn't mean nobody's money down.
Yes.
But it's about how you're JVing, what skills you're bringing to it,
It's about working with other people. Yeah. So no money down is very little of your own money, because you can do a lease option for as little as £1. Or you can work with people, work with investors. You wanted to give your money to people. You wanted people to invest with. There are people out there that want to give you their money, that want to give it to you, because you might have more time than them. You might have more knowledge than them. You might be able to give them something that they need, and they will want you. They need you. They need us, right? There are people out there who think they can't get into property because they don't have money. But as we're discovering, you can get in with very little or with using other people's.
Like we said earlier, we jumped before we'd maybe built our parachute. And I think there's a time to be sensible as well. And you described me as a risk taker earlier, but I think maybe looking back, we would have done it differently, right? We would have worked, and maybe pared back our hours, because it has been hard, like going straight into property. And so for some people that works instantly. For us, it's been a slower build.
And walking out on jobs with big salaries, and then that's a big number to try and replace once you've already left. But I think a lot of it is like, had we maybe done Masopi a couple of years ago, we we would have approached it differently as well. I think, in some ways you look at it and you say, well, over 5 years of us both being in the UAE, we between us bought, five houses. And then this year we've taken on 4 rent-to-rents. We've completed the purchase of this terrace we're turning into an HMO, and we're sale agreed on the next door property to that to then turn into another HMO. So in sort of 12 months, 14 months, something like that we've been around Progressive, we've done more deals than we did in the 5 years before that. There's a role of, I've got my salary and I'm working in a good job and I can put that to work. But there's also that role for well, come to Progressive and find out how you can best make that money work for you, because it can be transformative.
But having a contingency plan is...
Having a contingency is massive.
Yeah, I mean, what you did was you supercharged your success. Like you sped it all up because opportunity costs, right? Because time is money. And if you can condense the amount of time that it takes you to build these portfolios and to build this income, then, you can reach your goals much more quickly.
And I would say, though, we're not... Like, we never wanted to be, the big time developers. We wanted enough property that would allow us the freedom to choose what our life looked like.
And what does that look like? I mean, what is the aim? What is the goal?
I mean, for us, I think it's to spend time with our families, to travel, to just have the freedom to choose, and to not necessarily be tied to one location. Like, so yes, we live in Nottingham, and our portfolio will be there, but that we have the freedom to move around as we see fit.
In the sort of ideal situation here, we build up that kind of income again, and then we're in a position that we can say, right, we're going to hit the streets in Nottingham, we're going to work on our kind of pipeline of houses, find something, go sale agreed, and then while the legals are being done, bugger off to Vietnam for 6 months or 3 months.
Because you can.
Yeah. Right? And you don't have to be in the office on Monday morning because, the solicitor's doing their bit, the surveyors are doing their bit.
And I can answer emails from anywhere.
Exactly. And then we can then choose what that looks like. We can take the van off back to France for 2 months, or,
we can finally make it to the south of Portugal.
We can finally make it.
Well, it's just like a dream. You make it to the south of Portugal.
That was the other option.
Oh, I see. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. So for anybody out there who's thinking about property and whether or not it's something they should do, what would you say to those people?
I'd say it's really hard at times, and it can be a really lonely industry. There's plenty of other industries you go into where, you're working away at something and then you get a job, you go and do an internship or something, and you're suddenly surrounded by people who do that job. In property, you can work for 40 years essentially on your own. So finding a community of people, finding people that you can bounce ideas off and sense check yourself and be like, am I mad? Is this actually working? And they go, yeah, those numbers look good. Just go ahead with it. That's the job,
I think a big thing for us in this whole process has been mindset. And so I think for anybody who's thinking about getting into property is that you sort of have to work on your mindset at the same time, because as James said, it is a lonely industry, and you will have a lot of people around you saying, why are you doing that? You should have done this. And
what you mean, family members, friends?
Everyone will tell you that. People you don't even know will offer you unsolicited bad advice. So it's really important that your mindset's really strong. And we read a lot of mindset books in the first few months of doing this, and Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway was a really big game changer for us, because we were terrified. It was scary. We'd gotten to a point in our careers where, we were quite comfortable. We knew what we were doing. We were pretty good at what we were doing. We were getting decently paid for it. And then to just leave all that behind and, start over in a whole new industry where we didn't really know what we were doing to begin with, and to build a business from that. And then to be completely on your own in that, because you're now responsible for your own business, and you've got to deal with the tax man and the builders and all of these different things. And you have to be strong in your own sense of self to get through that.
And exactly. And this is why communities like the Progressive community are so important, because you have people who are on the journey with you, who can help, that you can reach out to and feel part of a community. So hopefully not feel quite so lonely, because I imagine people who go out and do this alone, number one, they don't know what they don't know, and probably could supercharge their portfolios much faster. But number two, without that network kind of pushing them forward and building them up and keeping them going, must find it very challenging.
And the last thing I'd say is, in terms of finding something to do, I've never come across another industry where at its core, if you're buying property, you can leverage the bank's money, investors' money, other people's money and time and energy to build your portfolio. If you go and play the stock market, you need the 100 grand to invest in the stock market. No one's going to lend you 100 grand to go and play the stock market, right? But if you're going to buy a house, the bank will lend you 75% of that. An investor will lend you the money. SaaS pension groups will lend you the money. The money is out there and people are willing to give it to you. It's just about finding the deals. And I've never come across another kind of asset or business where other people are sort of so readily willing to hand over their cash for your projects.
Wow. Well, I think on that rather inspirational note there, we can draw this to a close. But, it's been so fabulous to hear your story. Thank you so much for coming in. You really appreciate it. I know a lot of people out there will have got a lot of value. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure to be out of our work clothes.
Yeah, wash the dust off.
Yes.
Off. Yeah, it's been good.
And who knows, maybe at some point in the future when you've got to the south of Portugal, you can come back and tell us about it.
Absolutely.
Anyone can achieve time and financial freedom through property with the right knowledge. All you need to do is download our free Buy to Let report, which covers the fundamentals of finding, funding, and filling your properties in the most effective ways possible. Take action now, click the link in the description, and finally change your life.